Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sunday Club. I know you've been waiting for this one, and as you can see, we have a familiar face on the digital screen. Anand Ranganathan, thank you for joining us.
Hi, thanks, Advaita. Pleasure being here.
On the Sunday Club, there's been so many people demanding that you come, so I'm really happy to have you with us today. And then, of course, there's Suhel, Seth, our regular Sunday clubber, and we're waiting for Abhijit, who is, I guess, looking for a hat, which he likes to wear on the Sunday Club. And then, of course, Kanchan Dada is also going to join us in a little bit, but we don't want to keep anybody waiting. So let's just get started. We're already at 150 people, so that's barely in a minute. So we shouldn't waste any more time and dive right into it. The show was going to be about Pegasus, but Pegasus, we planned the show a couple of days ago, around midweek. But it just fell apart, frankly. Nobody's even talking about it. I think it was.
I think collectively, Advaita, if I may interrupt you, we've been snooped more. I would say even Suhel has been snooped more than all the people who were accusing, the government of snooping on Pegasus. Am I right, Suhel?
Yeah. Although I have to say, taking off from what Anand just said, there are two issues about Pegasus. And sadly, it is not actually about Pegasus, the brand or the name. Mm-hmm. Issue number one is, whatever happens, the government must come out with either a white paper or some level of clarification so that people know if there was any snooping. If the government says they didn't snoop, then who did it? And if no one has done it, then issue a white paper. But to have Parliament stalled and then to have this, nagging doubt in everyone's mind that there is snooping going on, it's not a good sign, and it's certainly not a good a measure of confidence in the government. The government is being knocked for no reason if the government hasn't done it. And if someone else has done it, we need to know. As simple as that.
Yeah. And we've also been joined by Abu bin Mitra Arbi.
Oh my God. Had I known we're going to have such august company.
Alaikum assalam and greetings, Eid greetings to all our brethren and sisters. I just want to say, Macron has complained. He spoke to Naftali Bennett today, the new Israeli Prime Minister. Apparently, the people spying on him were Moroccan intelligence.
I see.
Traced it back to Moroccan intelligence. His private number was being spied on by Moroccan intelligence.
Well, that's pretty rich, because you can't attribute intelligence to the Moroccans of any kind.
Oh my God, no, this is not that kind of show.
But
that's not racist. It's just culturally indexed.
What are you just saying? Anyway, see.
You again improve your audio.
My audio is fine. Can't you all hear me?
No, there's something on your left of your screen that's coming. Is that a thumb or a fingernail or something like that? I don't.
That's the ring from my conjuring look.
Acha, okay.
I'll pull it over every once in a while.
Okay. So, like I said, the grudge and the ring, they kind of go with your entire that Korean horror.
Today you've been very controversial on your remarks on the Calcutta biryani.
Well, it's the truth. Calcutta doesn't make biryani. They make aloo ka pulao and they pass it off as biryani.
Is there a moderator or has she left?
No, I'm here, but I'm reading the comments and they seem to suggest that Abhijit has gone through something called love jihad and has been switched to the other side. I don't know what's happening on the show today. It was supposed to be like a really serious discussion about snooping.
Yes, Abhijit needs to explain his attire. Is it because, he's the guy who was snooping on that Khashoggi thing? Abhijit, come clean now.
Yes, I was. I was indeed.
Ooh, okay, Abhijit, what is Pegasus? How can is it true? Does it exist? How do they access phones?
Okay.
What's the story?
So see, Pegasus absolutely exists. It is true that it is cleared for government-to-government sale. Now, the issue is their servers were in Cyprus. And because they overpromised certain things to their clients, the servers got shut down. The parent company shut down this server function in Cyprus. So we don't know who has leaked what exactly. We suspect it's a disgruntled employee who leaked this set of names. Now, there are a lot of things in this that simply don't add up. First of all, when you buy an intelligence product from another country, there is some level of intelligence sharing that happens, but mostly there is none. Because your intelligence that you gather on certain people is your closely guarded secret that you commoditize and trade at a later stage. So for us to be having for our intelligence to have its backroom servers sitting in Cyprus open to being compromised by somebody else violates all the first principles of intelligence gathering. So something doesn't add up here, number one. Number two, if you look at the list, it is prone to selection bias. Remember, the names that are being released, out of 300 odd names, only 40 have been released. Why have 40 been released? Because it's very convenient to pass these 40 names off as being opponents of the government, and therefore the government is spying. If you release the remaining 260 names, there would be a completely different pattern that would emerge. Right? Then there was this thing that Anil Ambani was being spied on. Now, supposedly Anil Ambani, according to these same people, is the one who paid bribes to get Rafale offsets. Why would they be spying on somebody who bribed them, allegedly? See, there's nothing here that's adding up. Okay, on one hand, you want to spy on your opponents. Why would you spy on Ashwini Vaishnav? Okay, now, if a government is, first of all, governments have access to far more sophisticated products than this, but this is a product that seems to work uniquely with the iPhone. So much for iPhone security. It doesn't seem to work with Android all that much. Even here, out of all the attempts made, it turns out that most of the attempts at infection failed, and where it succeeded, it seems to have only marginally succeeded. Plus, where it seems to have succeeded, we have not seen any kind of action to suggest that the government either preempted or put roadblocks in something that was coming up, some special exposés or whatever. Right? So nothing here makes sense. How do you know it wasn't, say, Airbus buying this product and using it? How do you know it wasn't Pakistan buying this product and using it? Right? The thing is, yes, Pegasus has been used, but we are being fed a slice of the story to believe it was only government opponents who were spied on. And number three, there is absolutely no link back to the government of India. This is the same way that they try to spread the Rafale story. Anil Ambani financed a movie by François Hollande's partner. François Hollande presided over the Rafale sale. Therefore, Anil Ambani actually gave this contract to François Hollande so that they would get Rafale offsets. You see, you can't make a case up this way. This is like saying there was, Abhijit is wearing an Arab hat. Okay, an Arab carried out a suicide bombing in Syria. Therefore, Abhijit carried out the suicide bombing in Syria, while I'm alive and well sitting right here in Delhi. Okay, this is not the way investigations work. Now, based on this...
Very quickly, can you reduce your volume just a tad because there's a little bit of an echo?
Okay, is this better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, now, in all of this, we are supposed to believe that a parliamentary inquiry and whatnot has to start off based on a very selective interpretation of what we are being spun. We are not being given information, we are being given spin. Information would have been when all 300 names were made public, or at least make all 300 numbers public. Redact the numbers you know, and then make the rest of them public so we know who's who. Okay? This is not reportage, this is agenda.
Anand, do you want to come in here? I mean, the selective leaking of a list, which possibly could have been a lot more longer, points to some sort of agenda, as Abhijit is saying, and this was meant to set a certain narrative in place, a narrative which enforces the larger narrative of the so-called slide of India into some sort of majoritarian state.
Yeah, no, I think Abhijit has covered all the bases. pun not intended, looking at his attire. But I like to add a couple of things. I think one, as Abhijit said, there is no whistleblower. You don't know the set of 300 phone numbers, the Indian set of 300 phone numbers. You don't know who passed on those 50,000 numbers, where they've come from. Is there any connection of those numbers with NSO? You don't know that. The flip-flop was by Amnesty. And finally, you don't know if there is any connection between the Indian government and Pegasus. You really don't. So this is a complete fly-by-night operation. And having said that, there were calls for, as Suhel also said, I mean, of course, all of us are totally against illegal snooping. But legal snooping is important, and it's allowed by law, by constitution as well. And that's how you catch the wrong guys, the bad guys. So as far as illegal snooping is concerned, people have been calling for JPC, but there has to be some more information. And as somebody rightly put it, if you are aggrieved and if you feel that, if Rahul Gandhi feels or Congress feels that he's been snooped upon, file a court case. Like, for example, there was no JPC in Justice Loya's case. There was no JPC in Rafale, if I'm not mistaken. It was the Supreme Court that adjudicated on both cases. And because it was the Supreme Court, people accepted the verdict. It went against the so-called, the usual suspects, but they had to accept it because it was the Supreme Court. Now, tomorrow, if this same government constitutes a committee to look into this, and the verdict is that, look, Indian government has not been snooping, do you think all these guys who showed up this whole thing, bolstered this narrative, they're going to believe that? Absolutely not. So, as I said the other day, the evidence is thinner than a sambar made by a Punjabi or by Abhijit,
No, that's true. And if we look at the narrative setting, there was definitely an attempt to build this up into a big expose. There was, first of all, chatter, Lachin's chatter that this big leak was coming up. So that then on Twitter there were these very cryptic tweets, these thirsty tweets, I guess, which were kind of saying that wait, and whichever side you're on, if this is important, then it's going to be explosive, and then someone else said the monsoon session is going to be a washout. This is going to explode, and Suhel, you're a communications expert. The build-up to this so-called expose was there. I mean, it was checking all the boxes in terms of building up, some mahal for it. But when it came, I think it barely lasted maybe an hour, 2 hours. I don't even know if it lasted that long, frankly.
So it was a con by appointment. Everyone was told that at 9 p.m. there will be an expose. Exposés don't have appointments. Exposés are called exposés because they happen when you least expect them, and they're not supposed to announce their arrival. It's not the monsoon or the IMD. If the IMD had said it, they would have got this wrong as well. But we'll park that as for a later discussion. 3 things. Number 1, I, as a citizen of India, am against any form, as Anand also said, and so did Abhijit, any form of illegal spying, illegal hacking of any device of mine, if I haven't broken the law. If I have broken the law, or if I'm attempting to break the law, and if I fall into the category of terrorist, treason agent, blah, 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 then obviously my phones are bound to be tapped for economic offenses. Number 3, if you remember, Advaita, last Sunday at the Sunday Club, we were waiting for this Pegasus thing to happen. It didn't happen because our program ended at 8 p.m. or 8:20 because of Karju. At 9 p.m., the first release happened.
What? I don't think you need to slide in that.
Yeah, because of you and Karju's romance.
What nonsense?
Why don't you allow me to finish? You're behaving like all anchors. Now, if I recall right, and Anand alluded to it just now, I said it on multiple television programs in the week that's just gone by, saying any citizen of India has recourse to the laws that govern this country. If I'm an aggrieved party, I need to go to the courts. If the opposition is aggrieved, if Rahul Gandhi as a citizen believes that his phones are being tapped continuously, I have 3 questions. A, why didn't you raise it ever before? It's not that your phones were only tapped in the last 15 days. Number 2, How can you say that the IB officers always call me up and tell me? Because you're then putting those IB officers at risk of losing their jobs, even if they haven't done it. Number three, you can always go to court. The doors of the Supreme Court or the High Court in Delhi are always open to anyone. Now imagine if my name had appeared. I would have had only done one thing. I'd have gone to the courts, taken the government to task and said that I want a clarification from the government. Is my phone being tapped? Yes. Why? This is the answer. What we have done is we have successfully created pandemonium when there isn't one. But here's my problem with the government. The government issued a statement, which, ironic as it was, there was mayhem in Parliament. But the government should issue a white paper with statistical data rather than have Ravi Shankar Prasad address a press conference just after he's been sacked. No one's going to believe him in any case. Number two, the government must say that, look, we believe this has happened. And if you have any proof, tell us. It can't be a situation where I say, you say, and everyone else says.
There's a question that's already come in from Fozzie Alfred, and it's for Anand, AIM, and Suhel. What is your thought on Prime Minister Modi today on Goa's spiritual heritage regarding Augustine Church?
Yeah, if I can begin first. Advaita?
Yes, sure.
No, I think this is in keeping with the sheer ignorance that this government displays from time to time, and it has been happening for the last 7 years. I mean, you're talking about the time, if my history is the knowledge is not mistaken, this church was consecrated and built during the heydays of the Goa Inquisition, which was begun by Saint Francis Xavier. And, you're talking about 60 or 70 years of brutal repression of Hindus by the Christians, conversions, murder, rape, and all sorts of things. In fact, there was a castle that is supposed to be called Boulder Goem or something like horror castle, just opposite St. Francis Church. And all this is happening. Of course, I'm not very sure if St. Augustine's Church that the Prime Minister alluded to was also part of this Goa Inquisition. So maybe he can be let off. But, when you're praising a building that was certainly constructed and consecrated during the time of this brutal repression, it's very off-putting. It's almost like, maybe in 6 months' time, you would hear Narendra Modi praise Tipu Sultan. Who knows? He might. And then after 3 years, he might praise Aurangzeb as well. So this country is going in the other direction. And it's not actually appeasement. I think it is ignorance. For how long will we keep on saying that, people are doing this out of appeasement, that people shouldn't feel bad? No, I think it's rank ignorance, because people are so proud in the government, were so proud of not having changed even a single comma in our textbooks that were so lopsided and subjective in eulogizing mass murderers. It is the ignorance that has propped up from generation to generation. And why blame the youngsters, Advaita? I did not know so many things in the last 7 years that have propped up. For example, had it not been for Sanjeev Sanyal's wonderful book and for True Indology's expose, I wouldn't have known that the Emperor Ashoka was already a Buddhist before he let loose that murder and mayhem in the Kalinga War.
Yeah.
Normally, the whole narrative is that he saw all those, thousands, hundreds of thousands dead on the battlefield, and then he converted. No, he was already a Buddhist for 4 years or 8 years. Now, these are the things that, parents would take for granted, that their kids should know. This is our history. I mean, it changes the whole perspective about Ashoka, and we are here eulogizing a king. So I don't know which direction this is going, but thankfully science has not been touched as yet by ideology and politics. Maybe that's the silver lining of the cloud.
Thank you. Abhijit, do you want to come in on this one, or is that...
Look, this is basically, I think this is, the BJP generally has an extremely low knowledge of social studies. Generally, the Congress tends to be made up of people of the world, and they've lost touch with India. unfortunately, the BJP seems to be very eager to become people of the world, because that is that's the social mobility standard. It's the gold standard of social mobility that all yuppies seek to aspire to. So in addition to Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, you now have Sabka Saath Sabka Bakwas. तो चलता है, अब क्या करें?
But if I may, sorry, you want Suhel to come in, then maybe I just want to make one comment after that. No, I just wanted to say maybe slight disagreement with Abhijit, because some of the most moronic, mediocre, devoid of all luminosity, you can say, or intellectualism, are people from the Congress, Abhijit, and the left. I mean, their ignorance is legendary. So for you to say that BJP, lacks where Congress makes up in terms of wisdom and knowledge is, I would say, not quite true. Having said that, I would say Congress is certainly more. Yeah.
I said people of the world.
Define that. So, for example, you right now is a man of the world.
Yeah,
so remember, a citizen of the world.
International khiladi.
We have international guests on our panel.
A citizen of the world is basically a title given to anybody who is clueless about history, or deliberately wants to whitewash and create some kind of a non-existent history of brotherhood and peace that has now gone asunder. Okay, unfortunately, this is the social standard that BJP leaders seem to aspire to. Because remember, this is 3, 4, 5 generations of wealth you're looking at in the Congress. Patek Philippe watches, posh lifestyles, houses in Italy or in Ibiza or something like that, season tickets to the opera in Vienna and all of that. So, this is, BJP wants to get there. Of course, the problem is they're a bit like a Jhumri Talaiya ka Jhopadpatti wala coming to the Vienna Opera for the first time, listening to Donizetti going, sabas, sabas, kya kar diya re, sabas, sabas. So, it's bound to be there. When you have this sort of social, social mismatch, Jhumri Talaiya ka Jhopadpatti types trying to be, sophisticated philosophers and start talking about Aristotle and Plato. This is what ends up happening. There's nothing you can do about it. It's a class issue.
Auntie Manners is here today.
So I want to come in here.
Really, I mean, does it really have to do with a class issue, or does it
Advaita,
have to do with just being placatory and bending over backwards at the risk of denying certain histories? What the Congress is often.
Let me come in here, and let's go back into history in order to decipher what exactly happened.
Anand, please retweet. Everyone else also, please retweet the show link. Okay.
I've already done it.
Okay.
So 3 or 4 things happened. One is, when we attained freedom, we wanted to be free from Great Britain, but we didn't want to be free from the British way of life. And there was a desire among certain sections of society to embrace that life, because that life was seen as the life of arrival, the life of the privileged, and the life of the aware. In the process and parallelly, we gave little attention to education in our country, which is evidence in the fact that you have the largest number of degrees and the highest number of unemployability, because of when you index it to the kind of jobs that are available. Over time, the majority was made to feel apologetic about being the majority, because secularism was seen again as the badge of civility. And when I say secularism, it's announced secularism. It means you have to announce that you're secular. You have to announce that you love Muslims. You have to announce that you love Christians. Also, the privileged class had what they call convent education. So when you woke up in the morning, you didn't read the Hanuman Chalisa, you said the Lord's Prayer. When you said the Lord's Prayer, you came to class and you never understood Premchand. You were never exposed to Harivansh Rai Bachchan or Dinkar or Tagore. Let's imagine we were talking about English literature. You were never exposed to Tagore, even within the parameters of English literature. Your universe, and I love that, by the way, your universe was Shakespeare, was Shaw, was D.H. Lawrence, James Thurber. When you studied history, That history was either a pass me down or a hand me down from British historians or from Indian historians who wanted to ape the Brits and aim to be better and not tinker with history, their history, only to be seen as realistic or as people who were actually intellectual. Now, what happens is you've got generation after generation not knowing anything about India's civilization legacy. You know, Anand referred to Ashoka. There's a fantastic book by a guy. He's now fashionably called right-wing, Francois Gauthier, on the new history of India. Let's read it. Now, we started celebrating people like us. Yeah. The tragedy which Abhijit has just referred to and which we have discussed earlier on the panel, the tragedy is that the BJP wants to be people like them. And here the them is the Congress. Arvind Panagriya used to boast, oh, I'm living in the same house as Monte, I've kept his staff. And for God's sake, if you had his policies, we would appreciate that. Now, look at the richness of our history and the richness of our literature, but more importantly, the richness of our philosophy. Modi brought back Vivekananda. Modi brought back Sardar Patel. Although I'm against comparative politics amongst dead people, you know, Nehru versus Patel, but we'll park that aside. Look at the philosophical contribution made by Vivekananda or by Aurobindo or by the mother, more recently by Jiddu Krishnamurti. We've forgotten all of that. It's not part of our mainstream literature. It's not part of our mainstream thought. Today, the irony is there are more Sanskrit scholars of German origin than there are of Indian origin.
Exactly.
We've lost that. So you are creating what I call an intellectual vacuum. I do not agree or subscribe to forced literature or forced history. You must, however, provide me opportunities of historical equality as far as intellectual benevolence is concerned. So if you're offering me something intellectual, I must be allowed to seek contrarian views.
No, but are we also...
Where did we invest in libraries? I grew up in Calcutta spending four hours every day at the British Council. Why? Because the National Library was a mess. We did not invest in public libraries the way we should have. We did not invest in school libraries were a sham. They were hand-me-down books from the students who were leaving. So we have created, to my mind, a narrative which is not entirely true. But to paint that entire narrative as false will again set the hackers. So I'm not saying correct the history we've been taught, but offer contrarian views. And I'm glad that this administration or this dispensation is allowing that discussion. You know, I'm dying to get back to India and read both of Vikram Sampat's books. I haven't read either the first or the second volume.
Yeah.
On Savarkar. So yeah, it's important for us to understand that.
Yeah, I mean, the point noted about the deracinated Indian mind or the colonized Indian mind. In fact, I had a conversation with Pawan Verma on his excellent book on the Indus civilization, wherein, you know, he has addressed the same question of how, you know, civility equals, you know, that we do not bring up sections of history, like, for example, the destruction of temples, because we want to preserve a sense of, you know, civility in our discourse and things of that nature. But in the long run, these things become even more divisive because there's no truth telling or any kind of reconciliation that comes from sanitizing this aspect of history, as Marxist historians have often done so. But moving on to
one minute. I'll just make one interruption, Advaita. Read Anshul Chaturvedi's book on Vivekananda. It's fantastic. And there Vivekananda says that what if we didn't have the Ganges? Would we not, you know, have any other form of water? So for a so-called radical world, it would seem sacrilegious for Vivekananda to say it. But you've got to understand the logic that Vivekananda used in almost everything he said.
Right.
That has sadly gotten lost. We have confused Hindu religion with Hinduism as a way of life.
There's a question for Mukul Thakur for AIM. If they really had the government spying list or so-called spying list, isn't it a major security breach where they have phone numbers of all the Pakistani terrorists targeted by us? Why don't they warn the government about it?
I didn't understand the question.
The question basically is from Mukul Thakur is if the government, if Pegasus had the government spying list, so-called spying list, isn't it a major security breach?
No, we don't know if this is the government spying list. This is
No,
just some
if-
300 odd phone numbers,
Hmm.
which we don't know. It could very well be the government of India. I don't put it past the government of India, except when the government of India does all of this, you have to have due process authorization.
And clearances,
There
yeah.
has to be a secretary or a joint secretary level chap who signs off on this. And I know this for a fact because, you know, two Economic Time reporters, they had all my phone records and things from 2018 onwards, 2017, 2016, 2017, 2018. And I was told this by 2, 3 different people, and somebody within the government also warned me that this was happening. And sometime in late 2018 or 2019, the rules were made very strict and this whole thing was shut down. Okay. Now, it used to be very easy to spy on people. Now it's a completely different ball game, but irrespective, the government has to follow certain processes because sometime in late 2018 or early 2019, this whole thing was tightened up where joint secretaries have to now sign off on whoever is going to be spied on, number one. Number two, if you want to realize how lax it was at one point of time, go to about 2013 or 2014. You will still see the televised speech of Gulshan Rai at ORF Sci-Fi conference. When Saikat Datta asked him, "Sir, what do you mean process is more or less followed? Either it is followed or it is not followed. You can't have more or less followed." He just shriveled back and he said, "Well, we more or less follow it." Okay. I think it was in response to that the rules of business were changed and it was made, because I know for a fact in 2018 something happened within government to make spying spying authorization subject to the highest level of government. It's not anybody who can go do whatever they want. Okay, number one. Number two, remember when my whole Odisha episode happened, it was reported in Odisha papers and in national newspapers that when the Odisha police had come here to arrest me, they had started tracking my phone and things like that. Okay, so it is something that even state governments can do. Remember, government to government doesn't mean government to national government. It can also be in government to state government. Huh? There is no government to national government requirement out here. So you never know who is doing
interesting. What. That's an interesting observation.
Exactly. Exactly. So remember, state police can also acquire certain data, set up an intelligence unit and all of that. Never forget that.
So I think the most important thing, Abhijit, that you mentioned, and that is very important as far as all those people who hail themselves as being objective journalists, the first thing that should have been done is the list, the 300 names or the 300 phone numbers and the names belonging, the phone numbers belonging to those names should have been made public.
Correct.
Right now, the insinuation is that all those 40 odd names that have come out, the government had some grudge to bear against all of them. Someone was activist, someone was a journalist. What if it turns out that the other 300 odd, 360 odd people, half of them were virulently right-wing, the other half were actually so-called quote-unquote Godi media, with us thrown in.
If Macron
what would have been their excuse?
I have been told
what is to prevent Modi's phone from being tapped? How do you know Modi's phone wasn't tapped? How do you know Amit Shah's phone wasn't tapped?
Yeah. How do you know Advaita's phone is not tapped?
I am sure she's tapped because, she's such a preeminent journalist of modern day India. She must have been tapped. So,
I'm not even a journalist.
Okay, preeminent filmmaker, because filmmakers are a threat. Remember, a movie is worth 1 million pictures, because movie is a collage of 1 million pictures, and 1 million pictures is each picture is worth 1,000 words. So you're literally worth 1 trillion words. You're
not talking like a wise sheikh.
People are asking me now on the chat that can you please move Abhijit, his position, because I have to make a meme. What kind of questions are coming on this show, Abhijit? Thanks to you. He's so flattered. Moving on to the next topic, which is of Punjab and the battle royale which is going on between Captain Amrinder Singh and former cricketer turned politician Navjot Singh Sidhu. This has been ongoing for a while. It's a tough war. Most recently, a couple of weeks ago, we saw Captain Amrinder Singh come to New Delhi, but he was unable to meet with the Gandhis, the first family of the Congress party, and had to return. This is a sitting chief minister. On the other hand, the very next day or 2 days later, Sidhu arrived in Delhi and immediately got a meeting with the Gandhis, including a photo op with Priyanka Vadra, which he duly tweeted, or which duly made its way onto social media and the mainstream media, sending the message that he had their stamp of approval, and Captain Amrinder in some measure did not. Subsequently, there was a struggle, tussle. Sidhu also went on social media and said, hint, hint, AAP seems to be the party that gets my vision. And then shortly after that, he was made Punjab Congress president. There was a rumor that they were going to be meeting each other, Sidhu and Captain Amrinder Singh. However, Captain Amrinder Singh's office said that unless there was a public apology, there would be no meeting in the future, because Sidhu has spoken against Captain Amrinder Singh on public forums and on social media. Finally, of course, was the Punjab chief ceremony or whatever, and Captain Amrinder Singh did show up. That video went viral, the body language of Captain Amrinder Singh during that meeting, in which Sidhu's on stage and, I don't know, hitting a six into the audience or the crowd, and there's cheers, and he walks right by him and touches the feet of two people and then gets onto the stage and speaks up. It doesn't look really good for this party that's going to the polls next year. And Suhel, you're somebody who knows Captain Amrinder Singh personally as well. What do you make of this situation?
So I know both really, really well. I mean, Sidhu, when he first started out and wanted, market himself as a brand, I'm talking about ages ago. Captain, I've known both as a friend and almost his family. See, three things have happened. Number one, Amrinder Singh in the last elections never allowed Rahul Gandhi to come anywhere near Punjab. So that's obviously, it's like playing on Rahul Gandhi's mind. Number two, the manner in which the Congress has behaved is abominable. To humiliate a sitting chief minister, no matter what. See, this to my mind is the second partition of Punjab, but here a political party has been divided right through the middle. Who will benefit? The Shiromani and the BJP, but the BJP is not majorly there, so it'll probably be the BJP and, the Shiromani and AAP. But look at what's played out. You have allowed a person like Sidhu, who has never been loyal to anyone other than himself. Do you not remember that Arun Jaitley was the man who saved him in courts of law when he was indicted for murder? When he hit someone, that person died. So much so that in April 2014, when Jaitley was standing from Amritsar, Sidhu and his wife didn't even bother to campaign for him. Sidhu was the local MLA. Then, if you remember, he created the word Pappu. Today, that Pappu has made him his Pappu, in a manner of speaking. And then he came to the Congress. First, I still remember the last time he was together with Captain was August 17, 2017, when the Partition Museum was being inaugurated in Amritsar. That time the bonhomie was perfect. The very next day he went and made a public statement. Now, you cannot have the Pradesh Congress president and the sitting chief minister at loggerheads. Number two, what you're going to see is further divisiveness as the days come closer to the election. Because the next point will be, who is this chief ministerial candidate? Now imagine if Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi were looking at succession planning. If I were them, I would have called both into the room saying, thrash out your issues. But when we leave, we will leave with one common voice, one common hope, one common statement. Even that hasn't happened. So in many ways, the man that they forgot, Narasimha Rao, they are behaving exactly like him. They believe silence will sort issues out, denial of a situation will sort it out, and I don't know where the hell it's going. I mean, it's insane. No one would do it. And some people compare it to the Rajasthan model, but that's different. Here, you have a complete betrayal, in a manner of speaking, at two levels. One at Sonia and Rahul and Priyanka Gandhi's level, and the other at Navjot Sidhu's level.
Anand, have you been watching this play out?
Yeah, I think Suhel has said, I think he's again, I think been very incisive as far as Punjab politics is concerned. So there's very little to add. But what I'd say is I think it's all building up to be a battle of the dynasts, if I can put it that way. I mean, if Amrinder can be removed from the royalty for a bit and included in the dynast. But I think it's very interesting because I think one factor that Suhel did mention, or I think he forgot, slipped his mind, was that in Sidhu's corner is, of course, the scions, Priyanka, Rahul, and they always, history shows, the dynasty cuts anyone to size who rises up. PV Narasimha Rao was one name that was taken. But on the other side, on Amrinder's side, is, of course, he has a formidable reputation. And I mean, what he says, he does it. We know it from the last election. He didn't allow Rahul to campaign. But interestingly, one guy has the rank of a cabinet minister. And that guy is in his coterie. You know the name? Prashant Kishore. So yeah. Unless he's playing a double agent, I think Amrinder, it is going to be a very riveting battle, because I think it's a seesaw one. It's very difficult to defeat the dynasty, at the same time remain in the Congress. But on the other side, you have a guy who's produced stuff, who's actually done the hard grind, he's done the hard work, and he's reaped the benefits of his own doing. It's not that he's been handed a state by the Nehru Gandhi the dynasty. No, he's in fact it's the other way around.
Right.
So this is a battle to watch out for. But I would say Amrinder is not sulking, and in the corner he has Prashant Kishore with him, and Prashant Kishore, after the Bengal victory, is a lot more energized than he would have been if he had been tracked by BJP in Bengal. So I think it's a very interesting thing. I think the favor, I would tilt towards Amrinder, especially because it's actually a one state, one party election now, because Akalis and BJP have been nearly removed, and AAP, although it sees a chance in Punjab, it has no chance. People are, on the ground at least, they really don't want AAP. And if you know what happened last time round, they were thinking of 100 seats or 80 seats. They got, I don't know how many, 4 or 5 or something like that. So it's interesting. I would say I'm tilting towards Amrinder and Prashant.
The question that comes up, Anand, is how many people is Prashant Kishore actually with? Because he spent so many days in Delhi, like the Gandhis, and Sharad Pawar. So you have to wonder, even in that case, is.
But having said that, we would want our friend Suhel to spill some beans on Prashant. I'm sure Suhel knows Prashant equally well, don't you?
Have you met Prashant Kishore, Suhel?
No, but there was many years ago, because I had done Mr. Vajpayee's campaign, and then I did Sheila Dikshit's whole Bhagidari, blah, blah, blah. So at that time, someone had said, why don't you all combine forces? I said, I don't do what he does. He, to be fair to him, is brilliant in the whole electoral process where he gets his hands dirty. They have booth information, they have information on polling trends. So it's very scientific. They employ 600, 700 people. That's not, mine was always strategic in terms of, branding and positioning. Mine was never to ensure that Anand or Abhijit or Advaita actually win from that particular booth or from that particular polling station. So
sorry to interrupt, Suhel. Sorry, did you do India Shining campaign?
No, in fact, I was asked, but I wrote against it. And Anand, I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
If you remember, the India Shining campaign happened in 2004. It started in February, and the first commercial was with this man on a cycle, and where they were saying India Shining, India Shining. Please Google Seminar magazine of April 2004, where I said it's the worst thing to do.
Yes.
And I told Vajpayee, I told everyone, I said, sir, this will not fly because it's mocking the poor. By then, even telecom penetration was hardly in rural markets as you and I would have imagined. But they went ahead, they hired Gray, and it was an advertising campaign, and it bombed. But I warned them in April to say that stop spending, do a twist, but they didn't listen.
To be fair, since we're talking about seminar, Malvika Singh had been saying for months before that, this government is going down. And it was based more on the fact India Shining was sort of the coup de grace. The defeat had already been scripted before, because what had happened was the RSS refused to come out and campaign in that election, remember? They felt slighted or whatever. I mean, we still don't know what the inside story is, but they refused to come out.
Also, Jaitley was managing the campaign along with Brajesh in 1999 when I got involved. And the line that I gave was, "Hum abhi atal hain." But by the time 2004 came, the whole dynamics of the people managing Vajpayee's communication and campaign had changed. Then you had Pramod Mahajan, all these people. And so, I just let it be so.
Plus, it's very interesting to know that a lot of people making a noise now were actually the core of Vajpayee's, at least cabinet or maybe decision making. For example, Yashwant Sinha,
Absolutely.
Kulkarni. So,
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And the main point man in the cabinet for the communications team was Jaswant.
Yeah.
He was the point man.
Right. Now, I just want to add my 2 bits to the Punjab analysis. Of course, I'm not a Punjabi like Anand Ranganathan, so I won't you in my...
Wallah.
as he would. And of course, even though Suhel is born Punjabi, I feel he's more Calcuttan, he's so refined and sophisticated. He has to be
Are
a
you
bit...
trying to say Punjabis can't be refined and sophisticated?
I didn't
That's
say,
right. Advaita, this might be your last Sunday.
I said was that Suhel Seth, all I said was Suhel Seth is refined and sophisticated and he is a Calcuttan. That is all I said. I did not cast any aspersions on Punjabis like Mr. Anand.
Because you're being very condescending on the show today for some reason, just because you have...
Edi pitai karo ji, edi pitai karo. Ede upar kambal dal ke, edi sote na pitai karo.
The fact remains there is there is still a pending arrest warrant out on Anand Ranganathan in Punjab for advocating steamed chola bhaturas. Because that hits at the very living heart of Sikh culture, Punjabi civilization has never come under such heinous assault, even in the darkest...
Sorry, what did you say? Punjabi civilization? Isn't that an oxymoron?
He said it.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
He said that. I didn't say it. I didn't say it. He said it.
No, this is not Republic. Please calm down.
Now, you have, in addition to what Suhel pointed out about this Navjot being a opportunist, opportunism is fine in politics.
Of course.
The problem is he's a completely unproven commodity. These, the brother and sister, they are making decisions based on how many Twitter followers you have and how many retweets you're getting. What is this fellow's traction on the ground? Zero. As opposed to Captain who's won you several elections before, right? And he's a proven commodity. You are basically letting go of, what is that famous saying? Letting go of a bird in hand for 2 in the bush. Okay?
Yeah.
And mind you, what is, other than being a chamcha to Papu and Priyanka, what are the net assets that Navjot has brought to the Congress? See, this is not the way you incentivize your own party cadre, right?
So I still remember, Abhijit, I'll tell you about this asset. In Congress, if you want to please the dynasty, there's only one asset. You remember that in that huge lecture hall or auditorium, there were like probably 2,000-3,000 people, and Navjot Sidhu got down from the dais, and in full view, he touched the feet of Sonia Gandhi. That is all that is required. And from then on, it's been like a golden...
But this is what people even in the Congress tell me, that it is no longer about competence. It is how they've basically, the Gandhis have given up. They just want control of the party assets, and that is the only agenda that they're following right now. So now from a two-state party, they're going to come down to a one-state party, because with this kind of infighting that's going to happen with a chief minister and a party president antagonistic to each other, where do you think you're going to go in the Lok Sabha elections? Mind you, this is the same buffoon that brought a 190 seat party down to 44 seats, and then his greatest success is taking it up to 52 seats. Next election, he's going to come back down. Do you remember the CPI, CPIM? In the 2004 election, they went up to 65 seats. And after that, now they're down to single digits. That is what is going to happen with Congress now.
No, but Abhijit, here is where I want to ask the three of you this question. You see, elections, winning the election needs a hell of a lot of money. We all know that, right? And right now, as it happens, in Congress ki jholi mein, you have Maharashtra, which is the Kuber's cave. So, how much of that, the fact that Congress, although it's got 1/3 of it, of the Maharashtra riches, if I may say so, how much of that will have a bearing on the 2024 elections? We simply don't know, or do we? I mean, I'd like your opinion on that.
So at an average, having, looked at elections from what they spend on just advertising and branding and communication, you're absolutely right. Maharashtra, while they have 1/3 of power, they don't have 1/3 access to the funds, because Shiv Sena and NCP are way, way more powerful, more important in Maharashtra. Rajasthan, yes, but Rajasthan is not a state which spews that much of money. Punjab, certainly not in that league. Plus, please remember, the BJP has already scored several, sixers in the way they've captured the electoral bonds process. Finally, what has also happened is, I genuinely believe that Rahul Gandhi is a double agent of the BJP.
100%. 100%.
I genuinely believe. You'd either have to be intellectually innocent or very crafty to play the game that you're playing, where all you do is snatch victory every time from the jaws of defeat. Snatch defeat from the jaws of victory every time. So this double agent is now decisively bringing the Congress down.
Yes.
Is the Congress in free fall? Yes. Is it a bad thing? It's a terrible thing, because we cannot have a democracy without a robust opposition, which actually, Advaita, should be one of your next topics, not today, but next time around, saying what ails our parliamentary form of democracy? Because parliamentary democracy is not about a functional parliament. It's about a parliament that actually has a voice in policy ratification, policy validation, and policy creation. Seemingly, our parliament, or at least for the last 2, 3, 4 years, doesn't have that.
What stops someone like a Captain Amrinder Singh, who is a leader who does not need the Gandhis to win an election, is a veteran, has his own standing at a national level as well. In fact, a lot of his positions are positions that were not necessarily in sync with the Congress, but in sync with the country, with even the BJP stand.
Oh, yes.
So what stops him, Anand, from just heading out, forming his own party? I mean, this is probably the last election he may fight. He's touching 80. And what stops
It's
him?
easier to produce a baby at 79. It's very difficult to form a political party.
Yeah, Arafat being the example. But no, but that's a very interesting question, because, if Amrinder wasn't in Congress, I'm honestly telling you, some of his views are, in that sense, would be appreciated more by Modi's followers than of Modi's views themselves. I mean, especially against Imran Khan, especially against, how he loves the Indian Army and it's all what it does. And, how he gave it back to, the Canadian Pappu and all the Khalistani, rigmarole that was happening in Canada. So I think he's perfectly suited to be, if not the Prime Minister, but the Deputy Prime Minister, So it is an enigma why he carries on being in the Congress. I suppose being from, that I wouldn't call it baggage, but, I suppose it is. In many ways, BJP also has a lot of royalty. They haven't really done much, have they? I mean, most of the BJP royalty now is, or ex-royalty, if I may, according to the constitutional change, you're not supposed to call them Maharana and, Maharani and all, Rajmata and all. But if you look at the BJP now, who are the so-called royalty that are supposed to bring in votes? I mean, you have Scindia. Other than that, you have a very fading scions of the Scindia, the other Scindia dynasty. So I think maybe Amrinder Singh felt that if he were to leave Congress altogether, Suhel would of course know more on this. He just couldn't, or maybe they have something on him. I don't know. I just don't know.
Politics.
He's a very, I hate to say this, and I'm not saying it because I know him. He's a very decent human being. See, decency is a virtue which at times prevents you from doing what is actually right for you. But decency makes you behave in a particularly structured, tunnel vision manner. So Amrinder is a very decent, value-driven guy. He's not, a fence-sitter. He's not going to jump. As you rightly said, he is an avowed nationalist. He's a scholar. You should see the books that he has written. His knowledge of military history is formidable. So he comes with all of that. And then you're pitted against a guy whose entire political narrative is stringing along a set of crude jokes. So, sometimes you need an intellectual equal. Otherwise, then you walk away from the fight. So when Amrinder doesn't say anything in response to Sidhu, please don't consider it as weakness. Consider it as the scholarship is so deep that he wouldn't even want, it's like getting into a fight with a pig. The pig enjoys it and you get dirty.
But Suhel, I can't resist you. You talked about Sidhu and his jokes, but there's one, I would say, joke, quote unquote, joke of his that fits him perfectly now. For Sidhu, there is light at the end of the tunnel, but it is of a train that is coming and to run him over.
True. Brilliant.
I love that. I love that Sidhuism. I think it probably fits him now. Let's see.
No, I think BJP is of course also not much of a factor in Punjab, but had this been any other state, I think Captain Amarinder and the BJP could have worked out something, because he does have very strong nationalistic views. And Abhijit, before we wrap up, we wanted to just appreciate 30 years of liberalization. I appreciate it. And really Anand, P.V. Narasimha Rao, who has been sidelined by our chroniclers of recent history, as has been expected, and of course, the way he was treated by his own party. But I'd just love for you all to come in on that, starting with Abhijit, Anand, and then Suhel.
Look, P.V. Narasimha Rao, in his 5 years of running a minority government, did more for this country than any other prime minister has running majority governments. Okay, that man is a god. That man was a god. The way that family treated him and the way Indian history has treated him tells you what an ungrateful nation we are, and the sheer extent of bile and nastiness that runs through that family. But there is a very important lesson to learn. The saying, he who fights and runs away lives to fight another day? That is the mistake Narasimha Rao made with the family. And that is the mistake I suspect the current government will also make with the family. And they're going to pay the price for it ultimately. Because remember, even though Rahul Gandhi is an agent of the BJP, no doubt about it, the fact is, like they say, even a broken clock is right twice a day. All you need is for Modi to screw up something for that boy to become the prime minister. And at that point, I can tell you the BJP will never come back to power again. Because the level of bile that has set in, what he will do will make the emergency look like child's play. Okay. Now, we can have all this race to get his Nobel Prize and all of that. But leave aside the Nobel Prize and think about survival for the time being. Because so far, the ecosystem that has been created is a cabal of dunces. The only thing you can say about it is it's not as dumb as Rahul Gandhi's own echo chamber that he's created around him. Because all the smart ones in the Congress are on their way out. So ab bacha kya hai? But be very careful. This hubris that sets in based on 2 election victories can go horribly, horribly wrong. So wait. I'm still very, very scared about the future of this country.
There is something to it. Every time a Congress government, even in the last 7 years, for example, when Kamal Nath came into power in Madhya Pradesh, the first thing he did was really to, purge the government, the university,
Ruthless.
of anyone who even seemed to have some dotted line connection with somebody associated with the BJP or the RSS. So you're absolutely right. I think there is a level of vindictiveness that exists, and that they are unafraid of using, because quite honestly, I think they're used to dealing in power, much more than possibly the BJP is. So they don't quite know how to use it. But coming to you, Anand, liberalization, I think is an interesting part of our history. I remember I came of age during that era, and it was a very optimistic time as well, a fun time. We suddenly had MTV for one thing. So, but on a more serious note, what do you think, the fact that we're 30 years on, where are we headed? What do we owe to this man who we rarely speak about? And what are the lessons that we can take?
Yeah, so 2 things here. I think although a huge amount of credit goes to PV Narasimha Rao, of course, he was the one who actually saved India. And let's be very honest about it. We were saved by liberalization. I mean, if you look, and I'm not just talking about monetarily saved or fiscally saved, I'm talking about our health part. If you look at all our health parameters, if you look at the diseases that we've combated, if you look at our vaccination programs, if you look at the well-being, if you look at the, the kind of mortality rate, infant mortality rate, maternal, everything, liberalization saved us. It truly did. You can say a huge chunk of that honor of saving us goes to Narasimha Rao, but of course a large amount of that because Narasimha Rao also was in the same Congress, BJP, Indian politician mold, which is this bold dictum that socialism wins election. And Narendra Modi is a socialist, BJP is socialist, RSS is socialist, they're all leftists. I can't think of a single government or a political party since independence that has actually wrested power, wrested control, that was not socialist. I mean, you had the Swatantrata Party, which was, born as a reaction to socialism, and they lost miserably. And Nehru made sure that they lost. So, a lot of pressure was foreign pressure. If you look at the World Bank, if you look at the IMF, in fact, there was this amazing cartoon by R.K. Lakshman, who was the best judge of Indian psyche. You have Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh coming out of a meeting from, with IMF guys, and they're saying, oh, it's all wonderful. Nobody, wrung our arms or, twisted our arms, and their arms are twisted like 20 times both their arms. So, a huge measure of where India is now, we have to ironically thank the IMF and all those guys because they insisted. And remember, we had actually mortgaged our gold. Our gold was in the ship, and the ship was about to dock. And the gold was to be mortgaged to Bank of England. It was that dire. 0.6 billion, $600 million was our reserve. Right now, we have $600 billion reserve. So things have changed astronomically. But having said that, have they really changed? I mean, you look at the farm reforms. You look at Air India privatization. Now, all those things, the liberalization let loose that kind of animal spirit. But the animal has been captured and caged again, I'm afraid. It's 7 years and not a single public sector bank has been privatized. In fact, can I say this with certainty? Not a single public sector unit, I'm saying this, in the last 7 years has been privatized. Not one. What has been privatized is some shares in some PSU that has been bought by another PSU. So you have the junk, family silver junk that has been transferred from one torn pocket to another. In fact, we were talking about India shining. Vajpayee government did so much more economically to reform India than Modi government has. But as it happens, Modi finally picked up the gauntlet and said, okay, we're going to do farm reform because that was the pivot around which Indian economy was to pre-COVID times. We talk about 5 trillion. Now I don't know when that thing would come, 5 trillion. But the fact is, when you have all these farm reforms in the manifestos of Congress and all these political opposition parties, and Modi brings it to fruition, and they are the ones who protesting, still protesting, what can you do? So liberalization is something that was, I would say, a forbidden fruit that was tasted for about 20 years, but now it has gone back to this withering Garden of Eden.
So it remains an unfinished dream in many ways at this point of time. So Suhel, what about you? I mean, you'd already hit midlife crisis by then when liberalization happened.
She has been practicing that in her mind for 1 hour.
Yes.
Yeah, but ageism is as bad as racism. I'll let that pass. I don't want to be thrown. Let's go back to 1991. And as Anand said, it's important to note that in the government before that, when Yashwant Sinha was finance minister, that's when we mortgaged our gold. Because we were on the verge of default. Even a country which is now so-called ally of ours, Japan, refused to help us. In fact, Japan said that we will veto it if it comes up in the IMF or in the World Bank. 2 or 3 errors of history. Number 1, Narasimha Rao's first choice for finance minister was Dr. I.G. Patel. Dr. I.G. Patel had a stellar career as the governor of the Reserve Bank, director of the LSE, director of the Delhi School of Economics. But I.G. Patel, in many ways, ironically, as Narasimha Rao, had moved bag and baggage and set up home in Baroda. So when the call came from Narasimha Rao, he told Rao, he says, look, I've just about returned after being all over the world and I want to settle in. But there were 2 important papers, policy papers that he wrote. One was, I think it was called the Bonfire of Policy. So again, our historians are inept and so are most of our journalists. The budget, which is touted as the reform document of 1991 and thereafter, was not the reform document.
Exactly.
The reform document was when the policy Raj was terminated. When I say policy, means licensing policy Raj was terminated. That is when you didn't need licenses for manufacturing. For instance, if you remember, you had choices between 2 cars and 2 scooters.
Yeah.
Amongst these 4, none of the bloody things worked. What happened was, therefore, 3 things politically. Narasimha Rao led a consensual government, much like Vajpayee did. Majority governments in India have never worked for the betterment of the economy. And again, therein lies the contradiction. When they have the mandate, they can't deliver. Rajiv Gandhi, majority. Indira Gandhi, 1980, majority. Modi, majority. Economy, screwed. Vajpayee, non-majority. Manmohan Singh had to deal with the communists and blah, blah, blah. And Narasimha Rao. What Narasimha Rao did smartly was, every move that he started making, he said, I'm returning to Nehruvian economic thought, not the Nehruvian model of socialism, to placate the Gandhis.
Yeah.
Number 2,
he fooled them, actually. He fooled them.
He fooled them. And then he started recalibrating the Congress. Please remember, for the first time, Sitaram Kesri, when he became the working president of the Congress, he quietly alienated Sonia Gandhi, which is what pissed them off for years. Number 3, Manmohan Singh put in the towel twice. He said, it's too hot for me to handle. To which Narasimha Rao said, I will give you the cover. I will be the awning under which you will flourish. But like all things that happen in India, things begin to unravel. He was beset by the kind of scandals and corruption crises like no other prime minister. You had Chandraswamy episode, Khashoggi, you had Harshad Mehta, and then you had that famous Sukhram where, crores of cash were found in Sukhram's bedroom. Also, here is the tragedy of the Indian people. He never got re-elected. But what happened post that was the calumny which he faced and continued to face both till he died and after his death. His body was not allowed into Akbar Road. He is a forgotten chapter. He's not even on the Congress website. He wasn't, at least at that point in time. But he was in many ways the architect of India's, what I always say, India's second freedom movement. We gained political freedom in 1947. We gained fiscal freedom or economic freedom in 1991. The
And also, if
tragedy
I
of
may
our
add,
times is,
sorry.
the tragedy of our times is, to this day, other than the works by Sanjay Baru and by the extremely erudite Dr. Prabhakar, whose spouse happens to be Nirmala Sitharaman, we have not had any scholarly work done on Narasimha Rao. There's a new book out by Dr. Baru on 1991, which profiles every month that went by. But he is the most forgotten chapter when he should have been the most remembered hero of our times. And as Anand said, today, most of what we are, whether it is our foreign reserves, whether it is our economic independence, the ability to ramp up manufacturing, is because that man had the vision to set India free. But being Indians, level of ingratitude continues to exist. And it's sad that you've given Bharat Ratnas to all and sundry. But this man who actually gave us economic freedom is still not a Bharat Ratna.
Exactly.
If I can just add one line to that, Suhel, very well put. But also, I mean, this is why, you have these eras that are defined by individuals, and a lot of fate comes into it. Because, right now, if you look at the issues that India has been grappling with, right, there are 2 or 3 in the last 2 or 3 years, when you look back, you think, okay, what were Indians discussing? Were they discussing economy, or were they discussing CAA, or were they discussing, Ayodhya judgment? So, in the mind, what settles like a rock is 1 or 2 issues. And as it happens, I think Narasimha Rao was very lucky, because on one hand, when he was reforming the economy, making sure that India takes to something much better, grander vision, India was besotted by all those issues of, Babri Masjid demolition. The social fabric was what kept Indians engaged for, all of Narasimha Rao's tenure. So I think that kind of helped him bring all those reforms, because nobody was bothered about how the economy was doing. We had the bomb blast, we had, Advani arrested, the rise of BJP, so-called Hindutva, then Babri Masjid demolition. So Indians were preoccupied with that. That allowed Manmohan Singh and Narasimha Rao to actually set the economy right. So maybe if, all those social things hadn't happened, maybe Indians would have protested and said, no, we want to go back to socialism, remove Manmohan Singh, remove Narasimha Rao. You just don't know,
That's a great point. In fact, one of the indictments of Narasimha Rao was his silence on Babri Masjid, but he then later went and said that he was betrayed. He was told by Kalyan Singh that there would be no car sevaks, there would be a lot of police bandobast, blah, blah, blah. But the jury's out on that. I generally believe that Narasimha Rao did far more than what he's gotten credit for. He was a far more erudite, scholarly leader. And what it also shows is that consensual governments, because they have to deal with consensus, they have to manage parliament, they have to create an ecosystem where things get done. They are more adept at getting things done rather than governments which have brute majority.
Why was it such a bitter falling out? Has anyone able to, between the Gandhis and Narasimha Rao?
Because he had marginalized Sonia completely. Please understand what was going on at that time. Sonia was recovering from the tragic loss of a husband, and the family was in disarray. You had the Congress, which came on the back of several, rickety governments. She expected extreme loyalty from Narasimha Rao. And please remember, Narasimha Rao had also served under Rajiv Gandhi as he had under Indira. I mean, Narasimha Rao again made a seminal contribution to the extent that he could to the HRD ministry, not to mention the external affairs. So he was all set. He had packed his bags. He was moving in with his son, TV Rajeshwar Rao, in Hyderabad when this happened. And please also remember, if you go back into history, this was the time when the communists were also fighting. I don't know if this was the time, I think it was, when Jyoti Basu was refused permission by Harkrishan Surjit to lay a claim to prime ministership.
Yep.
So, there are all these things. The tragedy of Advaita is, and which is why I'm not praising you or saying that we're delighted to have Anand and Abhijit. These discussions have gone out of the window in India. With the result, what we are left with are the remnants of screaming, shouting, and spine-chilling invectives, rather than a reasoned analysis of why we are where we are and how did we get here.
Yeah, so true. I think we must have these kind of conversations more often. I think Abhijit is asleep now, so I was going to ask him to
No.
participate.
I am preaching the gospel of peace. I am holding the sea of peace.
Are you going to return to your harem this evening, Abhijit?
Yes, I am.
He doesn't
Thank
have
you very
one.
much, baby.
Well, please do like, share, subscribe this channel. We're going to be coming up with fresh content that you might enjoy. We again want to make this a space for constructive discussions, not construction.
Construction.
Although I do get heckled like I'm on a construction site, but that's another matter altogether. But we do want to make this a space for constructive discussions from some of the finest minds as we have today with us, discussing issues that really make you think, give you pause, and consider choices and decisions going into the future. So thank you everybody for joining us this evening, and please like, share, and subscribe. Anand, I hope you'll come back to join us.
Oh, I would love to. It's been a real pleasure. I think the company has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Especially after having an East Indian like Suhel and a South Indian like me, we need to have a North Indian like you.
I think if it goes on like this, I'm going to hire Prashant Kishore.
But I do hope you join us again. We'd love to have you here permanently. Like someone said, why don't you make Anand Ranganathan a permanent member of this Sunday? We're going to sound like the Security Council. So that offer I'm offering you live. If you would like to join us as a permanent member of the
we would love that.
We would love that. And, we'll keep calling
No, but this is serious. We would really, Anand.
We would really like it, Anand.
We don't need to flatter you, but you bring a lot of intellectual and integrity-driven heft. And it would be
very kind.
All of us to be with you.
You're very kind. You're very kind. I'll definitely give it great thought and get back to you. Thanks, Advaita.
That's a no. Damn it.
Yeah, you said great thought.
Come twice a month and every alternate week.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.